Hi everyone, I'm Ellen from Classroom Unbound, and today I'm going to share with you the books that we read in October. For those of you who are new to my channel, I'm a homeschooling mom of an 8, 6, and 4-year-old, and we love books. So I like to share the books that we read to see if anyone else has read those books and get your opinion on them. And if you have a recommendation for a book that you loved to read this month, please share it down below as well. So this month I didn't read quite as much as I wanted to, mostly because my mom was visiting for the majority of the month. She has never been to any Asian countries, so we wanted to make sure to show her everything that we could in South Korea. So the first book I finished in October was The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna, and I loved The Nightingale. So I figured, just stay with the same author and try another one of her books. I was probably still more of a fan of The Nightingale than The Great Alone, just because of the subject matter of the book, basically. I love historical fiction, and this wasn't so much historical fiction, but it followed a girl, and I cannot think of her name right now. I don't remember. Her father was a Vietnam vet, and he had PTSD and a whole bunch of issues, and had this great idea that they could move to Alaska and restart their life. And this was back, I think, in the 60s or the 70s. And they moved to this like rural town, and didn't realize that it was dark for the majority of the year, and it really brought out like the worst in her father. So it was her mother, her father, and herself living there, and they barely have any money. They're scraping to get by, and they really have lessons to learn, many lessons to learn, living in Alaska on this great vast landscape, but almost completely on their own. They don't have running water, they have to hunt, and all these skills that they're not used to having, and then while dealing with this mental issue that her father had, and then her mother's unrelenting love for her father. It was a really interesting book, and probably not something that I would have picked up and read had it not been for the author and enjoying her writing. But it was an interesting read. I enjoyed it. The second book I read was Let's Pretend This Never Happened, a mostly true memoir, and that one was by Jenny Lawson. And she starts off the book saying that things are mostly true but not all true, and she doesn't want to get anyone in trouble, basically. So she doesn't tell what parts are true and which parts aren't true, but some of the stuff I feel are so far-fetched that they kind of have to be true, because how else would she come up with it? But I don't know. So it's basically her upbringing and just her life in general. She tells about her father and how his love for taxidermy, and the most hilarious story I thought in the book, it was she was laying in her bed, and I think she was like 6 and her sister was 4, or she was 8 and her sister was 6, something like that. And her father comes in, wakes them up at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and is like, I have a magic squirrel. And the kids are like, okay. And at this point you can tell they're already used to his antics. Excuse me. And the squirrel, he has a squirrel in a Ritz cracker box, and it pops out, and he's getting the squirrel to answer questions by like raising paws. How much is 3 + 2? And he's raising paws, and they're like, wow, this is impressive, it is magic. And then come to find out it was a dead squirrel that he made into a puppet. And it was just so outlandish that I just felt like it had to be a true story. I'm not sure, but the book was hilarious. It does have language in there, so if you're not a fan of foul language, don't read it. And it's also very laid back writing. It was more of a like storytelling. It's a blogger who wrote it. So it was more of like a storytelling, it's not, you're not getting a great work of fiction reading this, but if you just want a book to just take a break from some serious reading and just laugh, this is the book. The third book I finished this month was Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, and I listened to that on audiobook, and I'm so glad that I did, because he spoke a lot of different languages in it, and it was really interesting hearing him speak the languages on the audiobook. So I used Audible, and I tried it out for the first time, and that was the first book that I used, or that I read, and I really enjoyed his book. Mostly because I felt like I understood him on a certain level. So my mother is white, my father is black, and he has the same thing but in reverse. So his mother is black and his father is white. And he grew up in apartheid, South Africa. And he tells a lot about his experiences. And I remember one where he went on a playground and, you know, all the white kids are on one side and all the black kids are on the other, and he didn't know which side to go to. And I would say when I went to school in the States, I felt that same struggle. It was, you know, you had the white kids on one side and the black kids on the other, and it was often, for me, I felt like, you know, if I hung out with the black kids and they would talk about white people, then I kind of felt like, well, my mom's white, so I'm white too. Why are you talking about them? And they're like, no, 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 you're black. And if I'd hang out with black kids, or excuse me, the white kids, and they talk about black people, and I'd say, well, my dad's black, so I'm black too, you know, you shouldn't say that. And they're like, no, 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 your mom's white, it's fine. So I just constantly felt this like pull from both sides. So I kind of understood Trevor Noah on that level and really could empathize with him. So I liked that part of the book and how I felt more connected to him in his story. And it was really interesting learning about just apartheid in South Africa and growing up during those times and the struggles that he had as a colored person. He wasn't white, he wasn't black, they considered him colored, and it was just like a whole different group of people. So I really liked it. Definitely recommend listening to that book. Actually, I thought it was really nice just hearing his hearing the languages that he could speak. And one of the things that he really talked a lot about in there was the importance of how languages connect people. Even though you may not look alike, you may not live in the same place, but if you speak someone's language, you automatically have a connection with them. And I really enjoyed that, and I loved that. And I find that here, living in South Korea, a lot of times I don't speak fluent, nowhere near fluent South Korean, but when I make an effort to say small phrases or to learn the languages, I can see the people's faces light up and they feel more connected to me. So I really like that. The last book that I read this month was actually read aloud for our homeschool, and it was I have to read the title because it was super long, but Ida B and her plans to maximize fun, avoid disaster, and possibly save the world. Sorry, what? I don't know.
I'm watching the brain cake video.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. So that was our read aloud for the month, and that was a recommendation from the Build Your Library. So that was our read aloud, and I don't know, I have mixed feelings on the book. I felt like from the title I was expecting something different from the book. So the story wasn't bad, but I went in with different expectations. So I don't know what I exactly thought, but the book wasn't what I initially, you know, I basically had judged the book by its cover, and then I was disappointed because I did so much judging. So it follows Ida B and their homeschooling family. It's Ida B, her mom, and her dad. And they live on this nice like apple orchard farmish place, and they're a homeschooling family, but her mother ends up getting cancer and can't homeschool her anymore, and she is completely devastated. She had tried kindergarten a few years previous and had a really horrible time, and so they pulled her out and homeschooled. But she had to go back to school because her mother was so sick, and her dad had to sell part of the land, and she's just determined to cut off her feelings on everything and just be mad at the world. So it was interesting reading the language in the book, how she described her feelings, all of her emotions that were, you know, the anger, and the way she described just what she was going through. I liked that. I thought it was very rich. At times it was a little bit, my 6-year-old was a little bit confused by the amount of language she was using to describe some of her emotions. You know, so whenever I felt like it was a lot, like the similes and the metaphors that she was using, you know, I would take a break and let's talk about, you know, what exactly is she feeling and stuff. So, and my kids kind of had mixed feelings too. That wasn't a book that they were constantly like, yes, let's read it, let's read it, let's read it. You know, we can't put it down. And I will say though that part of it was because I felt like Ida B was somebody from the South, and so I would constantly talk with a Southern accent, and it drives my boys nuts. So that was partially my fault. But the other part was that they just didn't really connect with the story as much. I don't feel like it was a bad book at all, and it wasn't a hard read. It was a pretty quick read, but it was just that we were so busy over the month of October with traveling and stuff that that was the only book that we got to, and that's okay. And then as far as my oldest, he only read like graphic novels this month. He did a lot of Geronimo Stilton books and just random graphic novels that he picked up that I didn't even keep track of, because I really only keep track of his chapter books. So those are the books that we read for the month of October. Not a long list by far, but we were just enjoying my mother's visit so much that, like I said, homeschooling and reading kind of got put on the back burner a little bit. But we will be revving back up in November, and hopefully we'll have more books to share with you by the end of November. What did you read in October? What were your favorites? Or did you have some books that were just complete misses? Let me know in the comments below, or if you've read any of the books that we read, let me know as well and how you like them. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.